The rain had started early in the afternoon, soft at first, then heavy, then angry, falling like it wanted to wash the whole world away. Greenfield Park, usually full of children and families, now stood empty and quiet, except for the sound of water hitting the ground. The wind pushed the trees, the grass bent low, and puddles grew wider with every passing minute. The ground was soft and slippery, the kind of mud that holds on like a strong hand and refuses to let go. Naomi Carter walked slowly along the narrow path, her small brown purse close to her chest and a thin grocery bag swinging in her left hand. Her shoes were old, their soles almost worn out, and every step made a soft squishing sound. She had just finished cleaning 3 houses in one day. Her back hurt, her legs were weak, and her hair was damp from the rain that had soaked her earlier. She kept walking, because she needed to get home to her grandmother, Betty, who waited in their small apartment with tired eyes and a weak heart. Naomi breathed in the cold air, feeling the weight of the day pressing on her shoulders. She whispered to herself, "Just a little more, I will soon be home." She did not know that only a few steps away, something was happening that would change her life forever. At the far end of the park, close to the big oak tree, a small girl sat trapped in a wheelchair. Her name was Emma Brooks, 10 years old, with soft blonde hair that stuck to her forehead from the rain. Her legs were thin, her arms small, and she held the wheels tightly as the mud swallowed them deeper. Every time she tried to push herself out, the wheels spun helplessly in the wet ground. She was shaking from the cold, her clothes soaked, her voice weak from calling out for help. "Ms. Kelly," she cried again, her voice cracking. "Please, I need help. I cannot move." But Ms. Kelly, her nanny, stood far away under a shelter, her phone in her hand, laughing at something on her screen. She did not hear Emma, or maybe she simply did not care. A few joggers passed by earlier. They slowed down, looked at Emma, but none of them stepped closer. Some whispered to each other, some kept moving, and one man even took out his phone and started recording before walking away. Emma felt her throat tighten. Her small fingers trembled as she tried to wipe the rain from her face. Her wheelchair was sinking slowly, deeper and deeper, like the earth wanted to eat it. Her breath grew fast and sharp. Tears blended with raindrops on her cheeks. She looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would see her. Naomi was still walking, unaware, until she heard a faint sound. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then she heard it again, a small voice, trembling, scared. She stopped. She listened. The voice came again, weak, almost lost under the rain. Naomi turned her head slowly, her eyes searching the park. Then she saw her. A small girl, alone in the mud, her wheelchair stuck so deep that the wheels were almost buried. The girl tried to push again, but her hand slipped, and she cried softly. Naomi felt her heart pull. Something inside her moved. Without thinking, she dropped her grocery bag on the wet ground. The bread inside got wet, the fruits rolled out into the mud, but Naomi did not stop. Her feet rushed forward, her old shoes sinking into the mud with every step. The rain slapped her face, but she kept going. "Hold on," Naomi called gently as she approached. "I am coming. Do not be afraid." Emma looked up, surprised, her tears mixing with the rain. "I cannot move," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please help me, please. I am stuck." Naomi reached the wheelchair, her hands gripping the wet handles. She could feel how deep the wheels were trapped. The mud clung tight, refusing to let go. Naomi planted her feet firmly, ignoring how the water soaked her clothes. "Do not worry," she said softly. "I will get you out." She pulled once. The wheelchair did not move. She pulled again, her arms shaking, her feet sliding, but she pushed her weight forward. Her shoes were getting ruined, the mud crawling inside them, but she did not stop. Emma watched her with wide, frightened eyes. From the shelter, Miss Kelly glanced briefly, saw Naomi struggling, and rolled her eyes. She did not move. She only pulled her jacket tighter and looked back at her phone. The rain fell harder. Naomi took a deep breath, bent her knees, and lifted the back of the wheelchair with all the strength she had left. Her arms burned, her back screamed, but slowly the wheels came free. She lifted Emma out of the deep mud, step by slow step, pulling the chair backward onto firmer ground. Emma gasped softly, her chest rising and falling. Naomi knelt beside her, wiping her face with her palm. "You are safe now," Naomi whispered. "I am here. You are not alone." A small crowd had gathered, their umbrellas bright under the gray sky. Some held their phones up, recording everything, but not one person stepped forward to help. Naomi ignored them. All she cared about was the trembling little girl in front of her. Then, from the distance, the loud sound of car tires sliding on wet pavement echoed through the park. A black car stopped fast near the path. The door flew open, and a tall man in a dark coat ran through the rain. His face was tight with fear. His hands shook as he pushed past people. "Emma!" he shouted. "Emma, where are you?" Emma lifted her hand weakly. "Daddy," she whispered. Mark Brooks reached her in seconds, his breath heavy, his eyes wild. But when he saw Naomi kneeling in the mud beside his daughter, his face hardened. He grabbed Naomi's arm roughly. "What did you do to my daughter?" he shouted, his voice sharp and angry. "Why is she on the ground? What happened here?" Naomi froze, her heart shaking. Emma cried, "Daddy, stop! She helped me. She saved me." But Mark did not hear. At first, his mind lost in fear and confusion. The rain kept falling. The crowd kept watching. And Naomi stood there, cold, drenched, and wrongly accused. This moment, heavy with fear and misunderstanding, was only the beginning of a story that would change all their lives forever. The rain softened, but the weight of everything in the air felt even heavier. Naomi stood there in the mud, her clothes soaked, her hands trembling, her heart beating slow with fear. Mark Brooks still held her arm tightly, his face full of anger and confusion as he looked at her. His tall figure cast a shadow over her, his breath sharp, and his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "What did you do to my daughter?" he asked again, his voice breaking slightly this time, not from anger, but from fear that he did not know how to control. Naomi wanted to speak, but her voice felt trapped in her chest. She had done nothing wrong, yet she stood there like someone who had been caught stealing. Her fingers curled together, her shoes sinking deeper in the mud. She swallowed hard, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. Emma reached out with her small hand, her voice weak but urgent. "Daddy, please listen," she said. "She saved me. She did not hurt me. She helped me." Mark finally looked at his daughter. Her blonde hair stuck to her forehead, her lips pale, her hands shaking. He knelt down beside her, touching her cheek gently. "You are cold," he whispered. "Why were you out here alone? Why did no one help you?" Emma's eyes moved past him, toward Miss Kelly, who was still under the shelter, her arms crossed, her phone in her hand, pretending not to notice the chaos she caused. Mark followed his daughter's gaze, and when he saw Miss Kelly standing there dry and comfortable, something inside him snapped. "You left my child alone in the rain," he shouted at Miss Kelly, his voice echoing across the park. "You let her sink in the mud while you stood under a roof scrolling through your phone." Miss Kelly tried to speak, her voice shaking. "Sir, it was raining. I did not want to get sick. And besides, she is always calling for help. I thought she was fine." Mark stared at her in disbelief, his anger rising like hot smoke inside him. "You are fired," he said quietly, his voice low and heavy. "Leave now, and do not come near my daughter again." Miss Kelly grabbed her bag quickly and hurried away, her hands shaking, her eyes avoiding everyone around her. The crowd whispered, but no one stepped forward to defend her. When she was gone, Mark turned back to Naomi. His face softened slightly as he remembered what Emma said. He looked at Naomi's muddy clothes, her soaked hair, her tired eyes, and her hands shaking from the cold. He saw the grocery bag she dropped earlier, its contents scattered across the ground. Slowly, guilt began to press against his chest. Emma tugged his sleeve. "Daddy." "She lifted me out," she said softly. "I was stuck. Very stuck. She came when nobody else came." Mark felt his throat tighten. He stood up slowly and walked toward Naomi. Naomi lowered her eyes, feeling ashamed even though she had done nothing wrong. The mud was heavy around her ankles, and her hands were freezing. She waited for him to shout again, or accuse her again, because people often saw poor maids as trouble. But Mark stopped right in front of her, his voice gentle this time. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I misunderstood. I was scared, I thought the worst. But now I see what really happened." Naomi nodded slightly, her eyes still down. "It is all right," she whispered, her voice soft like a child's. "I only wanted to help her. I saw her crying." Mark took a slow breath. "You saved my daughter," he said quietly, "and I shouted at you instead of thanking you. I am truly sorry." Emma watched them with tired eyes, her hands rubbing her cold arms. Naomi then looked up at Mark fully for the first time. She saw the fear in his eyes, the relief that his daughter was safe, and the shame for how he treated her. She gave him a small nod. "It is okay," she said gently. "A parent gets scared, I understand." Mark felt a strange feeling in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time, something that reminded him that he was still human. He reached down and lifted Emma into his arms. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her breathing shaky. He adjusted her gently and looked at Naomi again. "Please come with us," he said. "You are soaked. You cannot walk home like this. Let me take you." Naomi shook her head quickly. "No, sir, I am fine. I can walk. My home is not far." Mark frowned. "You will get sick," he said, "and I owe you more than a simple thank you." Naomi hesitated. Her clothes clung to her body. The cold air made her teeth shake, and she still had a long walk ahead. She thought of her grandmother waiting at home. She did not want to worry her. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "All right," she said quietly. Mark opened the back door of his car and placed Emma gently inside. Then he opened the front door for Naomi, who stepped in with tired legs. The car was warm, the seats soft, and Naomi felt a strange feeling sweep through her, something between relief and fear. She had never been in such a fancy car before. As the car moved, Naomi looked out of the window silently. Her clothes were still wet, her hair still dripping. She kept her small purse close to her lap. The silence in the car was heavy, as if everyone was thinking about the same moment in the rain. Emma broke the silence first. "Thank you," she whispered from the back seat. Her voice was soft, but the words carried deep meaning. Naomi smiled softly. "You are welcome, dear," she replied. "I would never leave you there." Mark looked at Naomi through the mirror, watching her calm face. He wondered who she was, where she lived, and why someone with so little would risk so much for a child she did not know. He drove slowly, letting the moment settle in his chest. Soon, Naomi pointed toward her street. Mark looked around as he drove in, noticing how narrow the roads were, how old the buildings looked, how dark the hallway lights were. He parked the car close to her apartment entrance. "I will walk you inside," Mark said. Naomi quickly shook her head. "No, sir. It is all right. My grandmother will get scared if she sees too many people." But Mark had already stepped out. Emma stayed in the car, her head resting on the seat. Naomi opened her apartment door slowly. The door creaked softly. Inside, Betty Carter sat in a chair covered with a blanket, her hands on her chest. She looked weak, her face pale, but her eyes brightened when she saw Naomi. "You are wet," Betty whispered. "What happened, my child? You are shaking." Naomi walked to her and hugged her gently. "I am fine, Mama Betty," she whispered. "I just helped someone." Mark stepped in quietly. Betty looked at him, surprised by the expensive coat, the polished shoes, the calm but heavy eyes. "Good evening, ma'am," Mark said softly. "Your granddaughter saved my daughter today, and I wanted to bring her home safely." Betty placed her hand on her chest again, her eyes filling with small tears. "She has always had a good heart," Betty said quietly. Mark looked around the small apartment. The walls were cracked, the heater looked broken, and the kitchen shelf had only a few items. But the place was clean, filled with love he could feel even in silence. He stood there, realizing how much Naomi carried on her shoulders, and how little the world gave her in return. This moment, small and simple, was the first crack in the wall between two very different worlds. A crack that would soon open into something none of them expected, something that would change all their lives forever. The room stayed quiet for a long moment after Mark looked around. Naomi's small apartment. The silence felt warm and sad at the same time, like two different worlds had touched for the first time and did not know how to speak. The soft hum of the broken heater filled the air. The small table beside Betty had 2 medicine bottles on it, both almost empty. Naomi stood beside her grandmother with her hands held tightly together, her wet clothes leaving small drops of water on the floor. Mark cleared his throat gently. "Is there anything you need?" he asked quietly. "Anything I can help with?" Naomi shook her head fast, her eyes dropping to the floor. "No, sir," she said softly. "We are fine. We manage. God helps us." But Mark's eyes told him everything Naomi tried to hide. The weak heater, the small fridge humming with only half strength, the fading paint, the thin blanket over Betty's legs, these things spoke more loudly than Naomi's words. He could feel the weight of their struggle, a weight he had never known. Betty noticed Mark's eyes moving around the room. She smiled weakly. "We do not have much," she said softly, "but we have peace, and we have each other. That is enough." Naomi looked at her grandmother with love, her eyes soft and full of respect. Mark watched the moment quietly. He was a man who had spent years surrounded by money, expensive things, and people who only smiled when they wanted something. But he could see something here that money could not buy. He saw love, real love. He took a slow breath and looked at Naomi. "Let me do something for you," he said. "Not because you asked, but because your kindness saved my daughter. I want to make things right." Naomi shook her head gently. "Sir, I did not help her because I wanted something," she whispered. "I did it because she was alone, she was scared, and no one else came. I could not walk away." Her words touched him deeply. He nodded slowly. "I know," he said softly, "and that is why I want to help." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to Betty with both hands, as a sign of respect. "This is Dr. Laura Bennett," he said. "She is one of the best heart doctors at Midtown Medical Center. I will cover every cost for your treatment. You will not pay a single coin." Naomi gasped quietly. "Sir," she whispered, "we cannot accept that. It is too much." Mark shook his head. "No, Naomi, it is not too much. You lifted my child out of the mud when she could have drowned in the rain. You risked your safety. You destroyed your only good shoes. You held her like she was your own. Even after everything, you deserve more than what I am offering." Naomi turned her face away, tears forming slowly in her eyes. She did not want him to see her cry. Betty placed her hand gently on Naomi's arm. "Child," she whispered softly, "sometimes saying no is not humility, sometimes it is fear, and sometimes accepting help is also a kind of strength." Naomi closed her eyes slowly. Her grandmother's words always carried wisdom. Mark watched them in silence. He did not speak because he did not want to push too hard. He understood that pride and survival often walk hand in hand for people who have little. He let Naomi breathe for a moment. Then he spoke again, gently. "There is more. he said. "I want to offer you a full-time job at my house, not as a maid who is treated badly, but as someone who helps care for my daughter. She needs someone patient, someone gentle, someone who will not leave her in the rain." Naomi looked up sharply, surprise filling her eyes. She had been working in different houses for years, some houses where people barely looked at her, some houses where she was shouted at for small mistakes, some houses where she cried in secret. She had never been offered anything with respect. "You want me," she asked quietly, "to work in your house?" Mark nodded. "Yes," he said. "You will be paid well. You will have stable work, and you will not have to run from house to house every day." Naomi felt her heart shake. She wanted to accept. She wanted a better life for her grandmother, but something inside her was scared. What if she was not good enough? What if she made a mistake? What if the other workers looked down on her? What if she could not fit in a billionaire's world? She bit her lip gently. "Sir," she whispered, "I do not want to take advantage of you." Mark stepped closer, his voice calm. "Naomi, you are not taking advantage of me. You helped my daughter when nobody else cared. That is something I will never forget." At that moment, Emma, who had walked quietly from the door, rolled her wheelchair closer. Her voice was soft, almost tired. "I want her to stay with us," Emma whispered, looking at her father. "She made me feel safe. She did not shout at me. She did not leave me alone." Naomi turned slowly and looked at Emma. The girl's small hands trembled on her blanket. Her face looked pale from the cold she suffered earlier. Naomi's chest tightened. She walked closer and knelt gently beside Emma. "You will be all right," Naomi whispered, brushing a small strand of hair from Emma's face. "Nobody will leave you again, I promise." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She touched Naomi's hand lightly. "Please come," she said. "I feel safe with you." Naomi felt her throat tighten. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the emotion settle in her chest. Then she turned to Betty. "Grandma," she whispered softly, "what should I do?" Betty smiled weakly. "Child," she said, "God places people in our lives for a reason. If this is your path, follow it, and do not let fear stop you." Naomi nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. She stood up, wiped her face gently, and turned toward Mark. "I will work for you," she said quietly, "but I want to earn everything. I do not want free things. If you help my grandmother, I will work harder than anyone you have ever seen." Mark nodded with respect. "I accept that," he said. "I do not want to take your dignity. I want to give you what you deserve." For the first time that night, Naomi smiled softly. Mark looked around the room once more, then stepped toward the door. "I will send transportation tomorrow," he said, "and someone will come to take Betty to the hospital." Naomi's heart softened. "Thank you," she whispered. As Mark stepped outside, Emma waved gently at Betty. "We will come back," she said softly. "This is not the end." Betty smiled kindly. "My door is always open," she said. When the door closed, Naomi stood still for a long moment. Then she sank to her knees, her hands covering her face, her tears falling quietly. She cried not because she was sad, but because for the first time in many years, hope had entered her home like a warm light. Betty reached out and held Naomi's arm gently. "Everything will change now," she whispered. "But change is not always bad. Sometimes it is the beginning of a better life." Naomi nodded slowly. She looked up toward the door where Mark and Emma had left, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time. A small spark of hope, and she did not know that this spark would soon grow into something much bigger, something powerful, something that would shape her life in ways she never imagined. The story was only beginning. The next morning arrived slowly, with soft sunlight slipping through the old curtains of Naomi's apartment. For the first time in a long while, Naomi woke up before her alarm. She sat quietly on the edge of her small bed, her fingers curled together, her thoughts mixing with fear, hope, and worry. The events from yesterday felt like a dream. A strange dream that brought both fear and light to her life. She looked toward her grandmother, who was still asleep on the other side of the room. The blanket covered her thin shoulders, and her breathing was soft but a little weak. Naomi stood up gently, walked to her, and touched her forehead lightly. It was warm, but not too warm, just enough to remind Naomi of how fragile her grandmother was. She whispered, "Today will be different, Grandma. I do not know how, but it will be." A knock came on the door, soft and careful. Naomi jumped a little, her heart shaking. She looked at the clock. It was just 7 inches the morning. She rushed to the door and opened it slowly. A woman stood outside, wearing a clean uniform with the logo of Midtown Medical Center. She held a small bag and smiled warmly. "Are you Naomi Carter?" the woman asked. Naomi nodded, confused. "I am Nurse Ellen," the woman said. "Mr. Brooks sent me. I am here to take your grandmother for her first checkup." Naomi's eyes widened. She turned to look at her grandmother, then back at the nurse. "First checkup," she repeated softly, as if the words were unbelievable. "Yes," Nurse Ellen said gently. "He arranged everything last night." Naomi stepped aside. "Please come in," she whispered. The nurse greeted Betty softly, checked her vitals, and helped her sit up. Betty looked at Naomi with a small smile, her eyes bright with hope she had not felt in years. "Child," she whispered, "this is real." Naomi nodded with tears in her eyes. While Nurse Ellen prepared Betty for transportation, another knock sounded at the door. Naomi opened it again and saw a chauffeur dressed in a neat black suit. Behind him was a car Naomi had never seen in her life, shiny, tall, and looking like something from a rich movie. "Good morning," the man said politely. "Mr. Brooks sent me to take you to the mansion. He said not to rush, only come when you are ready." Naomi froze. The moment felt too big, too unreal. She swallowed, her hands shaking. "I need to get ready," she said softly. "Take your time," the chauffeur replied. Naomi closed the door gently and leaned against it, her heart trembling. She had cleaned many houses in her life, rich houses, cold houses, houses where she was invisible. But she had never stepped into the home of a billionaire with respect waiting for her. She felt nervous, afraid, unsure. But she also remembered Emma's small hand gripping hers, the fear in the girl's voice, and the trust she gave Naomi in the rain. That memory gave her strength. She washed her face, tied her hair neatly, and wore her cleanest outfit, a simple long skirt and a plain blouse. She kissed her grandmother's forehead, helping her into the wheelchair that Nurse Ellen brought. "You will be all right," Naomi whispered. "Dr. Bennett will take good care of you." Betty squeezed her hand and smiled. "Go, child. Do not be afraid. Your life is changing. Let it change." Naomi took a slow breath, stepped outside, and followed the chauffeur to the car. The ride to the Brooks mansion felt long and strange. Naomi looked out of the window, watching the city pass by. Her heartbeat was slow but heavy. She kept her purse on her lap, holding it tightly, as if it were the only thing that connected her to her old life. The car passed through a large iron gate, and Naomi's mouth opened slightly in quiet shock. The mansion stood tall and wide, with bright windows, green lawns, and a long stone path that led to the entrance. She had cleaned rich houses before, but this one felt different. Bigger, brighter, and full of a silence that felt wealthy and lonely at the same time. The chauffeur opened the door for her. Naomi stepped out slowly, her legs trembling slightly. The air smelled clean, with the scent of flowers she had never smelled before. The front door opened, and Emma rolled out in her wheelchair. Her face brightened when she saw Naomi. "You came," Emma said softly. "I waited for you." Naomi smiled. She walked to Emma and knelt slightly to be at her level. "Of course, I came," she whispered. I promised. Mark stepped out behind Emma. He wore a simple shirt and trousers, nothing too formal. But he still carried the look of a man who had seen both power and pain. Good morning, Naomi, he said gently. Thank you for coming. Naomi lowered her eyes slightly. Good morning, sir. Mark gestured for her to come inside. The house was large, clean, and quiet. The floors were shiny, the walls bright, and the air fresh. But even with all the beauty, the house still felt cold, like something was missing. We have not had much warmth here in a long time, Mark said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. They walked slowly down the hall. Emma held Naomi's hand, smiling softly. I want to show you my room, Emma said. Naomi followed her into a wide room with light purple walls, soft blankets, toys neatly arranged, and a window that showed the garden. But the room also had something Naomi noticed right away, something sad. Everything was clean, but nothing felt touched, nothing felt used with joy. It felt like a child lived there, but never really played. Naomi knelt beside Emma. It is beautiful, she whispered. Emma smiled a little. It is better now that you are here. Naomi softened. She brushed Emma's hair gently, something that made Emma close her eyes for a moment, enjoying a touch she rarely received. Mark watched them quietly from the doorway, his hands folded, his mind full of thoughts. For years he had paid for nurses, therapies, expensive toys, and special care. But none of them made Emma smile the way Naomi did. He took a long breath. Naomi, he said softly, I want to ask you something. Naomi stood up slowly. Yes, sir. Mark stepped closer, his voice calm. I want you to stay here full time. I want you to help care for Emma the way you did yesterday. You have something this house has been missing. Naomi's throat tightened. She looked at Emma, who looked back with hope in her eyes. I will work hard, Naomi whispered. I will not disappoint you. Mark shook his head gently. You already did more than anyone, he said softly. You gave my daughter comfort when she was drowning in fear. That is something no money can buy. Naomi felt tears gather slowly in her eyes. Mark continued. This house has been empty for too long. Maybe you can help us fill it again. Emma whispered, Please stay. Naomi nodded slowly. I will stay. Emma smiled, a real smile, full of warmth. Mark placed his hands in his pockets. Naomi, one more thing, he said. I found your bag in the park. Everything inside was wet. I replaced your shoes. Naomi covered her mouth gently, tears slipping out. Thank you, she whispered. Mark smiled softly. No, Naomi, thank you. Later that afternoon, after Naomi settled into her new job, the doorbell rang again. Nurse Ellen returned with a small paper. It is from Dr. Bennett, she said, handing the paper to Naomi. Naomi opened it slowly. Your grandmother's treatment has been fully scheduled. Her medicine will be delivered every week. Her care is now covered. Do not worry again. Naomi held the paper against her chest, her body shaking with silent tears. Emma rolled to her side. Are you okay? She asked softly. Naomi nodded, wiping her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. For the first time in a long time, I am okay. And as she looked around the wide hall, the bright lights, and the gentle face of the girl she saved, Naomi felt something deep inside her. A new beginning had arrived, and this time, she would not walk away from it. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that kindness can come from the people the world often ignores, and sometimes, the person who has the least becomes the one who gives the most. Naomi walked into the rain with nothing but love in her heart, and that one choice changed her life, changed Emma's life, and changed a billionaire's home forever. This story teaches us that help can come from anyone, no matter their size, their job, their skin color, or their pocket. It teaches us that when you choose to do good, Even when nobody is watching, God will open doors you never imagined. Naomi did not ask for anything, she only followed her heart, and in return, she received a new life, a healed grandmother, and a new family that saw her worth. Dear viewers, tell us where you are watching from, and tell us what you learned from this story. Your comments help us grow, and we love hearing your thoughts. If you want more emotional stories like this, comment more stories, and you will be the first to get the next touching story. Before you go, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. And as you leave, think about these questions, and drop your answers in the comments. 1. Do you believe kindness can change a person's life? 2. What part of this story touched your heart the most? 3. If you were Naomi, would you have accepted the help or refused it? Thank you for watching, and stay safe, stay kind, and stay blessed.